It was October 12th, 2018, just after 10 at night. Portland's air was crisp, the kind that smells like sea salt and leaves turning. The moving van idled by the curb while I dragged my single suitcase and a cardboard box up 3 flights of stairs that seemed to shrink under the weight of my regrets. The building had that washed-out charm of old New England apartments, warped floorboards, salt-stained brick, and the faint scent of mildew that never quite left. My new place, apartment 4D, was immaculate. Not tidy bachelor clean, but museum clean, surgical almost. Every mug in the cupboard was aligned like soldiers, towels folded with sharp corners, blinds perfectly even. Someone had clearly lived here, but it felt like a showroom for a life instead of a life itself. I was still setting the box down when I heard a familiar voice in the hallway. Alex Mercer? I turned, half smiling before my brain caught up. Peter Shaw, I said. No way. It's been, 6 years? Peter looked almost the same. Same square shoulders, same polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. We'd known each other in college, not close but friendly enough to share cheap beer and bad jokes during finals week. He told me he worked nights for a security company downtown, which somehow fit the clean lines of his posture and the way he seemed to stand just so. He offered to help carry my stuff, and I didn't think twice. We talked while climbing the stairs. Easy, forgettable conversation. It felt safe, familiar. When you've spent months rebuilding after someone stalks you, a friendly face feels like a miracle. I'd left Boston behind. Claire and I agreed that I needed a restart after the whole mess. The late-night calls, the shadow outside my window, the note under my windshield that said, "You look best when you're alone." Therapy helped, but the fear never fully left. I learned to triple-check locks, to memorize the rhythm of my own footsteps. Peter and I spent that first evening catching up over pizza. He told me about his shifts, said the hours suited him because nights are cleaner, fewer variables. I didn't think much of it then. He seemed thoughtful, quiet, maybe too quiet. When I finally lay down on the mattress that night, the apartment hummed with stillness, the kind of silence that isn't peace, it's absence. I noticed how everything felt arranged for someone else's comfort, not mine. Still, I told myself I was lucky to have a friend as a roommate, even if he seemed a little mechanical. The first few days passed without much trouble. I got into a routine. Work, gym, calls with Claire, sleep. I was rebuilding something resembling normal. The only strange thing was how Peter always seemed to appear without sound. I'd turn from the sink and he'd be standing in the doorway, hands in pockets, smiling slightly like he'd been waiting. One night I mentioned it, trying to sound casual. "You move quiet, man. You should wear bells or something." He laughed, a short, measured sound. "Comes with the job. You learn to listen." That made sense. Still, I started noticing other small things. My webcam, angled a little differently than before. A mug left in the sink when I knew I'd rinsed it. Claire's lavender shampoo scent in the shower, though she hadn't visited that week. When I asked about the camera, Peter looked at me like I was being silly. "Your angle looked better this way," he said. "Lighting matters for video calls, right?" I laughed it off, but a weight settled somewhere behind my ribs. Maybe I was just jumpy. After Boston, everything felt like a potential echo of danger. A week later, Claire came for the weekend. She liked Peter, at least at first. He was polite, respectful, made great coffee. Saturday night, we all watched an old horror movie, and she teased me when I jumped at the loud parts. It almost felt normal. Then, on Sunday, she woke me before dawn, whispering my name. I blinked and saw her face tight with fear. Peter was standing in the doorway, she said quietly. "Just watching." I sat up fast. "What? When?" "Just now. He said he thought you were home. He didn't even move when I turned the lamp on." I went to find him, but his door was closed, the light off. I didn't knock. Instead, I stood there listening to the stillness on the other side. Later, over coffee, he smiled like nothing had happened. When I brought it up, he tilted his head slightly, expression unreadable. "I knew someone was there," he said. "You shouldn't leave your door unlocked." His tone was mild, almost friendly, but the words slid under my skin like a splinter. That night, I lay awake long after Claire left, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of wood. I told myself it was nothing, residual paranoia, leftover fear from Boston. But when I closed my eyes, I could still see Peter's face framed in the doorway, his expression calm, almost curious. And for the first time in months, I wished I hadn't moved here at all. The next week blurred into a rhythm of forced normalcy. I'd get up early, make coffee, work remote on design drafts, then grab lunch with Claire over video call. Every morning, I tried to convince myself that the whole watching in the doorway thing was just an awkward misunderstanding, that Peter had heard something, checked on it, and froze at the wrong moment. It was the kind of rationalization therapists loved. Give the unknown a reasonable shape so you can file it away. But small things started to shift in ways that didn't feel reasonable. It began with the cupboards. I came home one afternoon after running errands and found every single kitchen cabinet open. Not just cracked, wide open like someone had been searching for something and didn't bother to close them again. Peter wasn't home. He'd left a note on the counter. "Working late. Coffee on the stove if you want. P.S. Don't forget the trash. P." I stood there staring at the note, trying to make sense of the image. Neat handwriting, polite tone, everything normal except for the gaping mouths of every cabinet around me. I closed them one by one, each thud echoing too loudly. That night, Peter came home around midnight. I'd left a lamp on just to keep the apartment from feeling too dark. He nodded at me as he came in, took off his shoes, lined them perfectly against the wall. I told him about the cupboards. He didn't even blink. "I was reorganizing before work," he said evenly. "I thought you'd appreciate it. The placement was inefficient." Efficient. That word stuck in my brain. I muttered something about warning me next time and pretended to focus on the TV, but my mind was spinning. The cabinets had been empty. I'd checked. What exactly was he reorganizing? Later that week, I found one of my sketchbooks moved from my desk to the kitchen counter. It was open to a blank page, except it wasn't blank anymore. A single sheet had been torn out and then carefully smoothed back in, as if someone wanted me to notice it missing. I flipped through every page, heart hammering, but found nothing else strange. When I asked Peter about it, he smiled the same way he always did. Patient, deliberate. "You must have misplaced it," he said. "You've been stressed lately, I can tell." There was no malice in his voice, which somehow made it worse. He sounded calm, reassuring. The way people do when they're sure you'll believe them. That weekend, Claire came over again. I told her everything. The cupboards, the sketchbook, the webcam angle. The way Peter's eyes never quite blinked when he listened. She frowned but didn't laugh it off this time. "Alex, that's not normal," she said. "Maybe he's, I don't know, obsessed with order. But the standing in the door thing, that's not okay." "I know," I said, rubbing my temples. "I just don't want to sound paranoid again. Not after Boston." "Paranoid doesn't mean wrong," she said quietly. That line stuck with me. A few nights later, I heard movement around 2 a.m. Soft footsteps, deliberate, like someone pacing the hallway outside my room. I sat up, holding my breath. The steps stopped right outside my door. Then I heard the faint sound of something sliding across wood like a piece of paper being slipped under. I waited until the silence felt unbearable before I got up and turned on the light. There was nothing under the door. Nothing in the hallway either. But as I stepped back inside, I noticed a small object on the floor near my desk. A thin strip of Polaroid film, the image completely dark except for a faint negative curve. No photo, no face, just that ghostly curl. The next morning, Peter was already making coffee. He greeted me with that perfect, neutral tone. "Sleep well?" I lied and said yes. By then I'd already decided I needed to leave. I emailed the landlord that afternoon, telling him I'd be moving out by the end of the week. He didn't ask why. Maybe he already knew better than to ask. That night as I packed, Peter leaned against my doorframe. That same stillness, that same polite smile. "I was starting to get used to you," he said. It should have sounded friendly, but it didn't. It sounded like a door closing behind me. The night before I left, sleep wasn't even an option. My nerves were wired tight, every sound amplified. I lay on the couch instead of my bed, easier to run if I had to. Around 2 a.m. the refrigerator hummed and the pipes groaned like tired lungs. That's when I heard it, the doorknob turning, slow, deliberate, metal brushing metal. Not enough to open it, just testing. I froze. My hand was wrapped around my phone, but I didn't move. I made myself breathe slow, steady, and even pretended to snore. The sound stopped after a few seconds, replaced by silence so thick it felt alive. I didn't sleep after that. I waited for dawn. When the first light cut through the blinds, I packed faster than I ever had in my life. I left a short note for the landlord, something polite, non-committal. Had to move out early. Thanks for the lease. I didn't even finish my cereal. The sound of the spoon scraping the bowl felt too loud, like it might wake something I couldn't see. I didn't say goodbye to Peter. His door was closed when I dragged my last box out, and I didn't care whether he heard me leave. Claire met me outside with the moving van. She didn't ask questions. She just saw my face and understood. We drove away with the mattress tied awkwardly on top, the straps creaking with every bump in the road. I watched 18 Mariners Lane shrink in the rearview mirror until it was just a shape against the sky. One more place I'd have to forget. But forgetting isn't easy when fear becomes habit. Even months later, I'd find myself checking locks 3 times, leaving lights on at night. Therapy helped me reframe it. "You experienced trauma again," my therapist said. This time it came in a familiar disguise. Claire tried to be patient, but she started to pull away. She said I'd stopped living, that everything was a perimeter check. She wasn't wrong. A year later, I took a freelance job that brought me back to Portland. It was just paperwork in and out. I told myself I could handle it. When I passed Mariners Lane, it wasn't on purpose. My feet just took me there, like muscle memory. The building looked smaller, somehow duller. I told myself I'd just walk by once, then leave. But as I reached the stoop, the door opened and a man came out carrying a lamp. Compact, short hair, wearing paint-splattered jeans. He dropped his key, looked up and smiled. "Hey, you moving in?" I shook my head. "No, used to live here. 4D. His expression changed. "You knew Peter then?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "He was my roommate for a while." The man nodded, shifted the lamp in his hands, and asked in a tone too casual to be casual, "Did Peter ever watch you sleep?" For a moment I couldn't speak. The words landed like a verdict I'd been waiting a year to hear. I felt my chest tighten, heat rising in my face. "Why?" I finally asked. He shrugged, eyes darting to the window above us. He did that to my friend too. Woke up with pictures under his pillow. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked away. It's strange how confirmation can feel like both a relief and a wound. For months I'd convinced myself I was paranoid, haunted by old fears. But I wasn't imagining it. The danger had been real, breathing the same air, sleeping one room away. That night, back at my hotel, I left the lights on and didn't sleep at all. After that conversation outside 18 Mariners Lane, I tried to move on, but the human mind doesn't file fear away neatly. It lingers, a grain of sand under your skin, small but impossible to forget. Back home in Boston, the city lights felt both safe and suffocating. I rented a new apartment in a modern building with cameras in every hallway and digital locks on every door. It should have comforted me. It didn't. Every time the elevator door opened too quietly, I expected to see Peter standing there, head tilted, hands in his pockets. ready with another calm, practiced smile. Claire came by less often. We were both pretending that everything was normal, but her eyes always lingered on me with a kind of quiet exhaustion. Once, she caught me staring at the reflection of our window in the TV screen, my body tense like I was waiting for movement. "Alex," she said softly, "he's gone." "I know," I said, "but I don't think he's finished." That night, she packed a small bag and said she needed space. I didn't argue. I just watched the door close behind her, the sound of the latch echoing longer than it should have. For months I avoided mirrors and cameras. I stopped sketching altogether. Even my pen strokes felt watched. But trauma doesn't just fade. It mutates. It finds new shapes to wear. One evening, in February, I came home from the grocery store and found a package waiting at my door. No return label, just my name in that precise, uniform handwriting I'd learned to fear. My pulse stuttered. I took it inside, locked the door, and stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a Polaroid film strip, just like the one I'd found in Eastport, and a single note folded 3 times. "You moved again. I liked the view. P." I don't remember dropping the note, but I remember the sound, a soft flutter as it hit the floor. I called the police. They sent an officer who looked sympathetic but non-committal. "Could be a prank," he said. "Anything else to go on?" I showed him the handwriting, the film. He bagged them, promised to run it through the system, and left me with a card. I knew nothing would come of it. Men like Peter don't leave fingerprints and only residue. After that, I changed my number and stopped using social media. Every few nights I'd wake up to faint noises, a door creak, a floorboard settling, and my brain would whisper, "He's here." Maybe it was my own paranoia. Maybe it wasn't. I started therapy again. Dr. Green, my new therapist, had this calm voice that made even silence feel manageable. She told me, "You survived being hunted. That changes your brain. You can't unsee what vigilance teaches you." She was right. I couldn't unsee it. Every shadow became a test, every sound a question. Is it him, or just my fear pretending to be him? Then one morning, about 6 months after the package arrived, I saw an article online. Security guard missing in Portland, last seen leaving night shift downtown. The photo was old but unmistakable. Peter Shaw. The article said he'd vanished without a trace. No foul play suspected. His apartment was neatly kept, almost obsessively clean. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I didn't know what to feel. Relief, fear, guilt, maybe all of it. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without the light on. But I left the curtains drawn, just in case. Time dulled the sharpness, but never the awareness. I got older, steadier, quieter. Therapy and work filled my days. Sleep and memories filled my nights. People told me I seemed better, but I didn't feel better. Just practiced. I moved to a smaller town outside Boston where neighbors waved and the mailman knew your name. It was peaceful in that ordinary way people crave. Still, I couldn't shake old habits. I checked my locks twice before bed, placed my phone facing down, never sat with my back to a window. One evening, while unpacking groceries, I found myself thinking about that first night in Eastport. The smell of fresh paint, the way Peter's smile looked too calm for the hour. I realized something strange. I'd never truly known him. We'd spent months sharing space, but I couldn't recall him ever talking about his family, his past, or even his favorite food. He'd existed like furniture, present, functional, but hollow. Maybe that was the point. Maybe he was never meant to be known. A few years passed. Life moved on, as it does when you decide not to look backward. Then, one cold autumn night, I returned home to find a thin envelope tucked under my door. My stomach dropped before I even picked it up. No address, no stamp, just my name again. Alex. Written in that same sharp, deliberate hand. Inside was a single photograph, a blurred image of me standing in front of my new apartment, grocery bag in hand, taken from across the street. No note this time, just the photo. I sat down hard, the room spinning. The lights flickered, or maybe my vision did. My mind screamed, "He's gone." But my pulse said otherwise. I didn't call the police this time. I didn't call anyone. I burned the photograph in the sink, watched the edges curl and blacken until the face in it, my own face, turned to ash. And then for the first time I felt something like peace. Because maybe Peter wasn't gone. Maybe he was a ghost in the shape of my fear, something I'd carry forever. But ghosts only live if you keep them fed. So I stopped feeding him. I started sketching again. Not people, but rooms, light, windows. I began teaching part-time at a community college, and sometimes I even forgot to check the locks before bed. But every once in a while, in the middle of a quiet night, I'll hear the faint creak of a floorboard and I'll freeze. Not out of terror, but out of habit. I'll listen, wait, then remind myself. It's just the house breathing. Because some echoes never stop. You just learn how to live beside them. The Quiet Tenant is the story of how fear can disguise itself as normal life, how danger can wear politeness like a mask. Alex Mercer escapes one stalker only to move into a home where surveillance hides behind friendship. Through Peter, he learns that evil isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's precise, quiet, and patient. Even after Peter vanishes, the true horror remains. The way trauma reshapes the mind, teaching it to distrust peace. Alex's journey is one of slow recovery, not in forgetting what happened, but in learning to live with the parts of himself that survived it. Trust your instincts. The human mind recognizes danger long before reason catches up. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Ignoring that instinct can cost more than comfort. It can cost safety, sanity, even identity. Fear doesn't make you weak. Sometimes it's the only thing keeping you alive long enough to find the truth. The first real snow of January 2017 had a way of muting everything in Brooklyn. Even the elevated trains outside 39 Powers Street sounded softer, like the city was exhaling. I was 23, working the closing shift at Millie's Diner, the kind of job where you smell like coffee and bacon grease no matter how many times you wash your apron. I lived with Jordan, an art student who painted all night and smelled like turpentine and cheap espresso. We weren't in love exactly, but we were both trying to climb out of the same pit: debt, bad breakups, and the need to prove to ourselves that Brooklyn meant adulthood. That night I was wiping down the counter when my phone buzzed. It was a number I hadn't saved, but I knew it. I could feel it before I even read the name. Derek Lang. The guy who once took a punch for me in high school, who used to turn dull parties into chaos. We hadn't talked in 2 years, not since his last bar fight in Queens. Outside, through the fogged glass, I saw him, standing in the snow like a ghost. His eyes were red, his coat too thin. "Evan?" he said, his voice cracking. "You still in the city, man?" I don't know what made me step outside. Guilt, maybe. Nostalgia, definitely. He looked like someone who'd run out of places to go. "You can crash for a few nights," I said. He grinned, teeth chattering. "Few nights? You'll regret that." I laughed because that's what we used to do, laugh off the mess. For the first 2 days it was easy. Derek cooked spaghetti and told wild stories. Jordan tolerated him with tight smiles. It almost felt like college again. Except I wasn't 20 anymore and I didn't find chaos charming. By the end of the week, the bottles started showing up. Derek's laugh grew louder, and he talked too fast, like his words were trying to outrun something. Jordan started locking her door. One morning she zipped her coat and said, "He's your friend, but I didn't sign up for a third roommate who sleeps with a knife in his boot." Derek overheard. That night he said, I'm not dangerous, man, just wired wrong, you know how it is. He poured another drink. I didn't answer. I just watched the snow outside and wondered when kindness turns into permission. By the second week, the apartment smelled like stale beer and damp wool. I'd come home from Millie's and find Derek watching static on the TV, eyes glassy. Sometimes, he'd leave the front door cracked open to the cold like he forgot how doors worked. Once, I woke up to the hiss of the gas stove. The burners were on, no flame. Derek sat at the table, head in his hands, lighter in front of him. "Jesus, Derek," I said, shaking him. He blinked up at me. "You shouldn't sneak up on people," he mumbled. "Makes me nervous." After that, I couldn't sleep right. Every sound in the apartment made me twitch. I started hiding my rent money in a shoebox and keeping my phone under my pillow. Jordan stopped coming home altogether. Derek would talk to himself in the mirror, repeating lines like he was rehearsing them. "You'll regret that," he'd mutter, the same thing he said in the snow. Sometimes he'd say my name like he was trying to remember it. One night around 3 a.m., I woke up and found him sitting in the dark living room. His eyes were wet, his face blank. "I can't sleep," he whispered. "Everything's too loud, even silence." He pointed toward the window. "Do you ever feel like someone's out there waiting for you to stop pretending?" The words slid into me like cold air. I didn't answer. I just sat there beside him until dawn, both of us pretending that being near another human could fix something broken that deep. By mid-February, I was unraveling. My boss at Millie's pulled me aside after I dropped a plate. "You okay, Carver? You look like a ghost." I wasn't okay. I was living in a room that didn't feel like mine anymore. Jordan gave me an ultimatum. Either he's gone or I am. That night I found Derek in the kitchen pouring whiskey into a coffee mug. "We need to talk," I said. He looked up. "Always a bad start." "You've got to leave, man." "Where? You think I've got somewhere else to go?" "You left the gas on, Derek. You scared Jordan." He laughed, sharp and mean. "Jordan doesn't know what scared is." Something inside me snapped. "This isn't high school anymore. I can't fix you." He froze, eyes narrowing. For a second he looked hurt. Then something darker flickered there. Understanding, maybe. "I just needed somewhere to breathe, man," he said softly. "You were supposed to be my friend." "I am," I said, stepping back. "But I need sleep. We'll figure something out tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he repeated. I went to bed with my heart pounding, afraid of what he might do, and more afraid of what I might. At 4 a.m., I woke to the sound of something crashing. Not glass. Wood. The front door frame was splintered when I stumbled out. The cold air bit my skin. Derek was gone. I called his name. Nothing. Just snowflakes blowing in through the open doorway. By morning, Jordan was back. The apartment was wrecked. Couch slashed. My guitar broken in half. Our sketchbook scattered. On the counter sat a note written in Derek's shaky hand. "You were right to be afraid. I finally stopped pretending." The cops took the note and told me not to expect much. 2 weeks later, they found him near the East River, dehydrated and raving about voices. They admitted him for observation. When I visited, he didn't recognize me. His eyes followed something over my shoulder, and he smiled faintly, like someone watching a movie only he could see. I left the hospital and walked until my legs ached. When I got home, Jordan was packing. We didn't fight about it. Some silences are just acceptance. We moved out a week later. Months passed. I got a new apartment in Queens. Smaller, cleaner, quieter. I kept telling myself I was fine. But I still double-locked doors, still woke up at small noises. One humid June night, I took a long walk after closing the diner. Out of habit, I passed 39 Powers Street. The building looked the same, cracked paint, flickering hallway light. I almost smiled, thinking how far I'd come. Then I saw it. Up on the third floor, behind the curtains of our old window, there was a shape. Still. Tall. Watching. I blinked, and it was gone. Maybe reflection, maybe not. I stood there for a long time, watching the empty window. Snow had been replaced by warm rain, but I felt the same chill. I thought about Derek, the kid who once saved me, the man I couldn't save back. I thought about what he said that first night. "Few nights? You'll regret that." And he was right, but not the way he meant. Because regret isn't always about what someone did to you. Sometimes it's about the part of you that let them stay. Loyalty is a beautiful thing until it becomes a chain. Sometimes the hardest lesson in friendship is knowing when to walk away. Not because you stopped caring, but because staying means losing yourself. You can't save someone who isn't ready to be found. And love, in any form, shouldn't cost you your peace. It started as a joke, like everything dumb we used to do. The summer of 2013 in Haverbrook, Maine, was nothing but heat, mosquitoes, and boredom. I was 19, home from college for the summer, already half regretting it. My friend Eli Graham, though, had other plans. He was magnetic in a way that made even the dumbest ideas feel like gold. Eli had bought a second-hand camcorder from a pawn shop, convinced we could start a YouTube channel documenting urban legends. He roped in his girlfriend Jess and my cousin Noah. Our first subject, Briar Hollow Forest, a patch of woods on the outskirts of town. Local kids claimed a drifter once lived there in the 80s, an ex-hunter who vanished after people found deer carcasses strung up like trophies. "We'll fake something," Eli said. "Get a few night shots, add a sound effect, boom, 100,000 views." We arrived at the forest just as the sun was dipping behind thick pine lines. The smell of wet earth and decaying leaves hung heavy. Eli carried the camcorder, extra batteries, and a flashlight with tape peeling at the edges. We laughed too much, our lights shaking as we filmed rusty sheds, tree carvings, and each other tripping over roots. Around 2 a.m., exhausted and mosquito-bitten, we packed up. The woods were quiet, except for crickets. "Ghosts aren't real," I said, smiling to calm myself. Eli smirked, always half believing he might see something. 2 days later, Eli called me. His voice was low, tight. "Dude, did you go back after we left?" "No, why?" "There's another flashlight moving in the background, behind the shed." I laughed. He sent me a still frame, grainy, dim, but there it was, a thin, tall silhouette, holding a light, facing our direction. We went back that weekend. Of course, Eli insisted on investigating. He brought more batteries, extra cameras, and a cheap night vision attachment. Jess opted out, annoyed by our obsession. Noah and I followed Eli deeper into the woods. The trail felt narrower, like the trees were pressing inward. By the old shed, Eli pointed out something carved into the wood, an eye roughly etched, surrounded by scratches. He filmed it closely, whispering commentary. "It's a message," he said. My stomach sank. "Not funny anymore," I muttered, but Eli didn't listen. He was already planning edits in his head. On the walk back, Noah froze. "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" I asked. "Breathing." We strained our ears. Wind, maybe, but it was steady, deliberate, not random. When we reached the car, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. The message read, "You shouldn't have come back." I showed Eli, expecting a joke. He didn't laugh. He just stared at the woods like he was waiting for someone to step out. That night, he uploaded the footage anyway. The Watcher in Briar Hollow got 3,000 views in 2 days. Comments claimed to see faces in the trees, shadows that moved wrong. One user wrote, "There's someone standing behind you at 412. Eli stopped answering calls for a week. I went to check on him. His trailer door was locked, but I could hear a TV inside, footage from the woods looping on repeat. When he opened the door finally, his face was gray. "I think he's out there," Eli whispered. "Who?" "The guy. The one from the video." "You mean the one we faked?" "No," he said. "The one who was already there." Eli's obsession grew. He began standing outside at night, flashlight in hand, scanning the tree line. He filmed constantly, hoping to catch a glimpse, convinced the watcher was real. He stopped sleeping. Jess tried to reason with him. He yelled at her, "You brought it home." She left 2 days later. I stayed with him, trying to reason, to calm him. But the footage told a story we couldn't explain. Screenshots appeared in angles our cameras didn't capture. Someone had been filming us, moving silently through the darkness. Frames showed the watcher shifting behind trees, following us but staying hidden. By late August, he looked like a ghost himself. Dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, trembling hands always on the camera. Every sound in the trailer made him jump. I told him to stop, to step back. He laughed, a hollow sound. "If I stop, I'll miss it. I can't miss it." Then, one morning, his trailer burned. Officially, it was faulty wiring. I helped Noah sift through the ashes. We found the camcorder, half melted. The SD card was intact. We recovered the card and watched the footage. Hours of night recordings, Eli moving silently through Briar Hollow, each frame darker than the last. And then, time-stamped 2:37 a.m., the last clip. Eli walked forward, camera facing his own face. "If you're watching this," he said, voice low, "it's real. It doesn't like being watched, but it wants you to see." He turned the camera around. Between two trees, the figure appeared. Tall, stooped, almost human but wrong, shadows bent at odd angles. It mimicked him slightly, like a twisted reflection. The camera dropped. Static. Police investigated but found no footprints, no signs of struggle. They dismissed it as tampering. A year later, fires appeared around Briar Hollow. Hikers reported seeing a tall figure in the smoke. Townsfolk joked about Eli's ghost. I moved away, deleted our videos, blocked anyone who brought it up. Last winter, I received an email from an unknown sender. No message, just a single file. A photo taken from inside my apartment window. I was sitting at my desk, editing. Behind me, reflected in the glass, something tall, out of focus. For a moment, I thought it was a coat rack. Then I realized it was breathing. Slow, deliberate. My heart froze. I've learned since then that some curiosity has consequences. The joke, the video, the hunt. It all seemed harmless at the time. But the world, or whatever lurks in forgotten corners, notices. Watching is not always benign. I don't go near Briar Hollow anymore. I don't film urban legends, and I never answer unknown numbers. Some things are better left unobserved. Curiosity can inspire adventure, but it can also awaken forces beyond understanding. There are boundaries in life, spaces and secrets meant to be left alone. Respecting limits and acknowledging the unknown protects both body and mind. Sometimes the consequences of observation outweigh the thrill of discovery. When I transferred to the University of Washington for graduate studies in criminal psychology, I thought I was starting over. Seattle was supposed to be a clean slate, a city big enough that no one knew my past, no one cared about my father's sudden death last year, and no one would expect me to be anything but myself. My name is Noah Reed, and at 24, I carried grief like a backpack full of bricks. That's when I met Caleb Rhodes. Not in a classroom, not in the dorms, but on a discussion board devoted to ethics in law enforcement. He was blunt, meticulous, and insatiably curious. Every message he sent was long, detailed, usually at 3 a.m., full of questions about human behavior, what people were capable of when no one was watching, what they did when there were no rules, no consequences. At first, I thought it was mentorship. I needed that kind of anchor. Caleb lived on the outskirts of Tacoma, in a warehouse he had converted into a hybrid of home and workshop. When I visited, everything was precisely where it should be. Labeled boxes, rows of psychology texts, an old record player softly spinning classical music. I liked the order. It quieted the chaos inside my own head. We became friends quickly, the kind who could go weeks without speaking, and then spend a night debating morality over cheap bourbon. He was brilliant, in a way that made you wonder if genius was born or assembled piece by piece from obsessive observation. Still, there were oddities. He never mentioned family. He was contract security, he said, but the hours he worked never added up. Once I asked if he liked his job. His answer lingered like smoke in a closed room. It keeps me aware of who disappears and who doesn't. I laughed nervously. He didn't. When I think back to 2018, that's when things started to shift. I had finished my degree and life had begun to feel stable. But then, out of nowhere, Caleb called. Slurred, exhausted, vaguely frantic. "Need a place to crash for a few nights," he said. My girlfriend Hannah wasn't thrilled, but old friends don't get turned away. He arrived with a single duffel and paranoia practically radiated from him. Locks checked twice, Alexa unplugged, curtains drawn in the middle of the day. When I joked, he leaned back, pale face serious. "You think the world's not watching? It always is." That week was manageable. We talked, drank coffee, debated crime patterns, laughed even. But his silences grew longer, his stares sharper, as if he were listening to a room that didn't exist. One evening he asked, "If someone told you the truth about everything, governments, people, you, could you handle it?" I laughed nervously. "Depends on the truth." He smiled thinly. "Good answer. Don't go looking then." By the end of the week, Hannah asked him to move out. He left quietly, nodding, leaving only a sentence that lodged itself in my brain. "You'll hear from me when it matters." 2 years passed. Hannah and I moved to Seattle. Life stabilized, a new job, an engagement, quiet weekends that felt safe. But safety has a way of being temporary. One afternoon at my office, I found an unmarked envelope in the mailroom. Inside was a flash drive and a single note. "You asked what people are capable of." I hesitated before plugging it in. The drive contained folders named after people I didn't recognize, detailed accounts of their routines, public records, maps with red marks, news clippings about missing hikers. And Caleb. There he was in a photograph, thinner, unshaven, standing beside a wall covered in strings and pins, like something out of a crime documentary. My stomach turned. I reported it to the police, half embarrassed, and weeks later an officer called. Caleb's last known address led only to an empty storage unit. Inside, boxes of notebooks and a single cardboard message. "Don't follow me. They already do." After that, Caleb disappeared. Vanished. For months, I told myself he'd joined another contract job, gone off-grid, something mundane. But late at night, I reread our old emails and noticed patterns I hadn't before. Small phrases mirrored my own words from months ago, almost as if he had been quoting me. Every few months, a new email arrived from a disposable address, blank except for a single line. "You're safer not knowing," or "I kept my promise." Hannah said to block them. I did, but they kept coming. Then, last October, I saw him, or someone who could have only been him, sitting in a rusted pickup in the parking lot near my office, head turned slightly in my direction. I blinked. When I looked again, the truck was gone, leaving only the faint smell of diesel. After seeing the pickup, my mind unraveled in subtle ways. I double-checked locks, counted the windows, traced every shadow on the sidewalk. I stopped leaving anything unattended at work. Emails were ignored until I confirmed the sender. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach clenched. I was aware of the smallest details. A neighbor's footsteps, a delivery van, someone lingering near my car. Caleb's words replayed constantly in my head. It keeps me aware of who disappears and who doesn't. I couldn't tell whether it was a warning or a threat. My life had become an intricate game of observation, suspicion, and avoidance. I felt like I was already being watched, already counted, already a variable in someone else's calculation. Even Hannah noticed. "You're not safe," she said one night, her voice trembling. "You're letting him get inside your head." but I couldn't stop. It was like a slow infection. Every unlocked door, every moment alone, felt dangerous. I wanted to tell someone, anyone. But who would believe the story of Caleb disappearing without a trace, of emails appearing from nowhere, of a truck that vanished into thin air? I couldn't explain it, and that silence, that weight, became a part of me. I tried normality. I went to work. I smiled. I went to dinner with friends. But at night, I traced his emails, the notes, replayed our conversations. Every detail I'd ignored before now seemed deliberate, intentional, like a warning I hadn't understood until it was too late. The weeks after the parking lot incident, my paranoia intensified. I started carrying my phone in my hand, checking reflections in windows, glancing over my shoulder constantly. One evening, I walked past a cafe and froze. There he was, standing across the street, hands shoved into his jacket, face partially hidden by a hood. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just watched. My pulse skyrocketed. I turned quickly, crossed the street, and didn't look back until I was safely inside my apartment. Caleb had a way of appearing without being noticed, of making himself present while staying invisible. It wasn't just physical. It was psychological. The way he'd ingrained himself into my thinking, predicting my reactions, guiding my behavior without direct interaction. The weight of silence was heavier than any confrontation. It made me doubt everything I knew, question every decision. Even friends at work noticed I was different. Hannah tried to pull me out of the spiral, but the moment I let my guard down, I felt exposed, vulnerable. Every blank email, every quiet moment, every truck or figure on the street reminded me that my life wasn't entirely mine. It's been years now. Caleb hasn't directly harmed me, at least not physically, but the influence lingers. I carry it like a shadow, a reminder of how fragile perception can be, how quickly control slips when someone else knows the rules you don't. I've learned to live with it. I've installed security cameras, changed routines, kept meticulous records. And yet, part of me wonders, have I already crossed the threshold, halfway gone into a world I can't unsee? Knowledge and awareness are double-edged. What we learn about the world, about people, can empower or paralyze us. Trust is fragile, and some truths are heavy, but ignoring them is sometimes heavier. Protect your boundaries, watch carefully, and understand that some forces in life are not meant to be controlled. They are meant to teach us vigilance, resilience, and the value of measured caution. Because in the end, disappearing isn't always about leaving. It's about how silently the weight of what you know can erase the life you thought you had. Returning to Willow Creek after my freshman year of college felt like stepping into a photograph. The river glittered faintly under the September sun. The streets smelled of damp leaves and coffee from the old diner, and the trees were just starting to turn golden at the edges. It was familiar, comforting, and somehow smaller than I remembered, as if my absence had compressed the town in my imagination. I had left as Clara Jensen, eager, ambitious, full of plans that didn't include small-town rhythms or teenage memories. Coming back, I was still Clara, but now tempered by lectures, dorm life, and a growing sense of the world's complexity. Reconnecting with Brinley Knox felt inevitable. She had been my best friend since middle school, the only person who could match my restless energy. Brinley greeted me outside the diner, wind tugging at her wild hair. She smiled, that reckless, open grin, and suddenly, I was 16 again, racing our bikes down the riverbank, daring each other to jump into the cold water. "You made it," she said, eyes bright. "You didn't forget me after all those emails." "Never," I replied, laughing. "I might have forgotten the town, though." We spent hours walking, talking, filling in the blanks of a year apart. Brinley was magnetic, still fearless, always pushing boundaries. She was exactly as I remembered, except, as the weeks passed, I noticed subtle changes. She was quieter when Logan Vance was around. Logan was different, older, self-assured, controlled in a way that made him almost magnetic too. But there was something under the surface, flashes of anger, hints of possessiveness. "He's protective," Brindley said one afternoon, tossing her hair over her shoulder with a laugh. "He just cares too much sometimes." I frowned. "Careful. That's not the same as control." Brindley waved me off, smiling. "You don't get it. He's perfect for me." Her defiance, once fierce, became quieter, her spark muted. Arguments became careful negotiations, laughter was measured, and the Brindley I had known, the one who would yell at an injustice, jump into a fray without thinking, was slowly retreating behind Logan's shadow. By the end of 2014, Brindley had settled into Logan's orbit. I was in grad school, and our conversations were occasional texts, phone calls when I had time. She always seemed cheerful on the surface, but something beneath her words carried tension, hesitation, and an edge I couldn't define from afar. It wasn't until late summer 2016 that I got the message that sent me back home in a rush. Something happened. I tried to fix it. My heart slammed against my ribs. I drove through the familiar streets of Willow Creek, arriving at Brindley's house to find her pale, withdrawn, her wild energy replaced with tight control over herself. Logan's apartment had been broken into, papers scattered, furniture tipped. Brindley's hands trembled as she tried to recount what happened. "It's Emily," she whispered, almost inaudible. She's gone. Emily, Logan's fiancée, dead. The police called it a suicide, but Brindley's voice hinted at something more. I pressed her. "Then why are they looking at you?" Brindley avoided my gaze. "Because I know things. Things no one else does." The unease was immediate. My mind spun. Questions, suspicions, fear. The Brindley I knew would never have stayed silent under such circumstances, yet she carried herself as if walking a tightrope over unseen flames. Logan was eventually convicted, sentenced to life. His guilt was clear. But Brindley's role? Obscured, indirect, enigmatic. I spent nights in her living room, sorting through what scraps of truth she allowed me to glimpse. Her life had become a series of measured steps, her laughter reserved, eyes scanning every doorway as if expecting something, or someone. Over the next months, I tried to piece together fragments of truth. Court records, mutual friends, news articles, I consumed them all. Brindley's pattern emerged slowly. She was present at every pivotal moment, never fully involved but never absent. Watching, observing, recording. Not malicious, not heroic, just there. I confronted her one evening at her kitchen table. "You were there. You saw everything." Brindley's smile was faint, calm, almost unnerving. "I told you, Clara. I know things." "Do you understand what that implies?" I asked, voice tight. "You could have stopped him." "I did what I could," she said lightly, stirring her coffee. "Some things aren't meant to be stopped by one person." Her control of the conversation, of the space, made me uneasy. This wasn't the reckless Brindley I had known. This was someone who understood consequences, someone who could manipulate perception without raising suspicion. She wasn't Logan, but she had learned to wield influence quietly, subtly. Every call, every message, every interaction carried weight. Her presence was calculated, but the weight of secrecy she carried made it impossible to fully trust, impossible to know what had been real and what had been carefully curated. Months later, Brindley returned from her temporary absence. She was calm, poised, wearing the silver locket Logan had once given her. I noticed immediately. She didn't speak of the past. She simply existed, composed. During a quiet dinner, her phone rang. She answered casually, slipping it into her pocket without looking at me. "It's him," she said, almost smiling. "Who?" I asked, tension coiling tight in my chest. "The one who wants to know what really happened," Brindley replied. "And I'm the only one who knows." I felt a cold knot tighten. I realized then that Brindley's knowledge had become a weapon, not of action, but of presence. She didn't need to act, She simply existed as the keeper of truth, untouchable, untethered from accountability. Her calm exterior contrasted with the chaos around us. She hadn't been reckless. She hadn't been innocent. She had been observant, careful, and perhaps complicit in ways I would never fully understand. I left that night unsettled. Driving through the dark Vermont roads, I thought of every moment we'd shared, every laugh and every warning I had ignored. Her influence, subtle and quiet, lingered like a shadow even when she wasn't physically present. Over the years, I pieced together the story as best I could from the remnants Brinley allowed me to access. Logan's guilt was certain, but the more I studied Brinley's presence, the more ambiguity emerged. She had been everywhere pivotal events unfolded. She had the foresight, the awareness, the patience to remain just on the edge of action. Living hundreds of miles away, I check my own possessions instinctively. A locket I own sometimes catches my eye, and I imagine her voice whispering across time and distance. I'm the only one who knows what really happened. The weight of that statement lingers. Some truths are dangerous not because of who carries them, but because of the quiet authority they confer. Brinley had survived every crisis, not through intervention, but through knowledge. She had shaped perception without ever being questioned, and the knowledge she carried gave her a subtle, pervasive power. I can't decide if I feel admiration, fear, or both, and I think that is exactly what Brinley would want. She exists beyond the reach of certainty, untouchable, always just a step ahead. I remember my own warnings to her years ago. Careful, control is not the same as care. But she moved through life on her terms, bending influence without breaking the surface, teaching me that presence alone can define events more than any action can. Even now, I sometimes wonder if knowing everything about someone else's story is a blessing or a burden. And I know deep down that some truths are better left buried and some people are always watching. The story of Brinley Knox taught me that knowledge is power, but power comes with responsibility. One can influence outcomes subtly without ever raising suspicion, and even silence can carry consequences as significant as action. Always respect the boundaries of others, and recognize that observing or withholding truth can shape reality as decisively as any deed. Knowledge carries weight, and some truths are dangerous precisely because only one person knows them. When I first moved to Portland, I didn't expect my life to change much. I was 24, broke and trying to call myself an illustrator, though most of what I did was sketch for freelance clients who paid late or never at all. I lived out of a duffel bag for 2 weeks after my lease fell through, crashing on a friend's couch until desperation made me answer an ad online. The post was simple: room for rent, quiet tenant preferred, no pets, no smoking. The photos showed a small, clean apartment near Hawthorne Street. 1 bedroom available, utilities included, rent dirt cheap for the area. It looked too good to be true. I called anyway. Leah Winters answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, almost soothing. "You can come by today if you'd like," she said. "I don't rent to many people. I like peace." When I arrived that afternoon, the building looked older but well kept, a narrow 3-story structure painted pale green. Leah met me at the door, a woman in her early 30s with dark hair tied back neatly and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Inside, the place was immaculate. Every surface gleamed. The cushions on the couch were aligned like a showroom display. Even the air smelled clean, lemon and something sterile underneath. "The room's at the end of the hall," she said softly. "You keep it really tidy," I said, trying to sound polite. "I like order," she replied, pausing before adding, "You should too." Her tone wasn't threatening, just matter of fact. The bedroom was small but bright, with a big window overlooking the street. I took it. I didn't think twice. After weeks of couch hopping, silence and structure sounded like a blessing. The first week was perfect. Leah barely spoke except to offer tea or remind me to lock the door. She worked from home, bookkeeping I think, and rarely left. She was kind, if distant. For the first time in months, I slept without noise outside my window or roommates arguing in the next room. But calm has a way of feeling off when it's too perfect. By the second week, I started noticing things. Small, nothing things that didn't make sense. Sometimes I'd hear soft laughter through the walls late at night, though Leah swore she went to bed early. I'd find the kitchen chairs moved slightly, or my bedroom door open a crack when I was sure I'd shut it. It didn't seem worth mentioning. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe she was just quirky. But then one morning, while sketching by the window, she walked by behind me and said, "You always draw here around 8. The light hits your hand so nicely." I froze. She'd been in her room when I started, or so I'd thought. It wasn't until the second month that the tension really started building. Leah became observant, too observant. She noticed everything. What time I woke up, what I ate, how long I spent in the shower. Once I came home with takeout, and before I even set it on the counter, she said, "You got Thai again. You don't even finish the noodles." I laughed awkwardly. "Guess I'm predictable." She tilted her head. "We all are, if someone pays attention long enough." Her words clung to me longer than they should have. She wasn't unkind, just specific. Every gesture, every movement was measured. She never raised her voice, never looked angry, but sometimes I caught her watching me for a beat too long, like she was studying the way I breathed. There were rules, too, small things she'd mention casually. No shoes in the hallway. Keep the bathroom mirror dry. Don't touch the second shelf in the fridge. It was easier to comply than to ask why. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd rearranged my belongings when I wasn't around. My sketchbook was sometimes turned a different way. My pencils weren't exactly where I'd left them. Once, my wallet was open on the desk. Nothing missing, just open. When I asked her about it, she smiled faintly. "You must be imagining things, Elliot. You're forgetful when you don't sleep." She wasn't wrong. I was sleeping less. The late-night noises kept me up, the muffled giggles, faint footsteps pacing the hall. When I checked, Leah's door was always shut, the light under it off. One night I knocked. No answer. But I could hear breathing, slow and deliberate, right on the other side. That's when I started locking my door. By early April, I was thinking seriously about moving out. I couldn't relax in that apartment anymore. Every sound felt intentional, every quiet moment too controlled. Leah, on the other hand, seemed brighter, more talkative. She asked about my drawings, about my parents, about ex-girlfriends. I gave short answers, hoping politeness would keep the peace. Then, one Friday, she poured us both wine. She said she wanted to celebrate new beginnings. I wasn't sure what she meant, but I drank out of courtesy. Halfway through the glass, her tone shifted. "You're a good roommate," she said. "Better than the last one." "You had another tenant?" She laughed, low and uneven. "For a little while, but he didn't listen." "To what?" "Rules." She set her glass down too hard, spilling a few drops on the counter. She stared at them like she'd committed a crime. "It's ugly when things stain," she whispered. That night, I woke to the sound of something scraping across the floor. I reached for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and opened the door. There was a kitchen knife lying on the carpet outside my room. I picked it up carefully, my heart pounding. Then Leah appeared in the hallway, her face half lit. "You left the light on," she said softly. What is this?" She smiled, serene. "Just thought I'd help." Then she turned and disappeared into her room, closing the door behind her. I didn't sleep again that night. By sunrise, I was done. I shoved everything I owned into 2 bags and waited until I heard her shower running before dragging them to the door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even lock up. I took the first bus downtown and rented a cheap motel room for the week. That afternoon, she texted, "You forgot your mug. Please come get it. Don't forget me." I blocked the number. Then the emails started. Dozens of them, all variations of the same message. Don't forget me. You left too early. You ruined it. The last one read, you'll see me again when you sleep. I never replied. 2 months later, I moved into a new apartment across town. No roommates, no shared spaces. I tried to forget, but sometimes at night I'd catch myself double-checking locks or glancing at the corners of the room, expecting to see her standing there, smiling that too soft smile. Once I thought I heard laughter through the vent. I told myself it was the neighbor's TV. It's been years since I left Hawthorne Street. I'm 30 now. I have a stable job designing posters for local bands, a few friends, a small apartment that's never perfectly clean. Still, I can't sleep without checking that every door is locked. I keep my furniture slightly uneven on purpose, so it never feels too neat. Last month, I got a letter. No return address. Inside, a single piece of white paper. You left the light on. No signature. I told myself it was a prank. It had to be. I threw it away, but I couldn't bring myself to sleep that night. I kept thinking about her. The way she watched, the way she whispered. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe she was dangerous. Maybe those two things aren't so different. I still dream of the apartment sometimes. It's spotless, silent, and I'm standing in the doorway, holding a mug I never owned. Behind me, a voice laughs softly and says, "Don't forget me." I always wake before I turn around. Sometimes the scariest people aren't monsters or ghosts. They're the ones who hide their loneliness beneath control. What looks like perfection can be a cage built to keep you close, not safe. Pay attention to the quiet boundaries people draw around you. When kindness starts feeling like surveillance, it's time to leave, because not every home is meant to be shared. They say you can't outrun heartbreak, but in September 2018, I sure as hell tried. After my breakup with Jenna, 3 years of love, arguments, and one spectacular collapse, I packed what little I owned into my Honda and drove west to Portland. The plan was simple. New city, new apartment, new version of me. The sublet ad looked decent enough. Downtown studio, shared kitchen, affordable rent. That last part hooked me. When I arrived at the building on 9th Street, I found a narrow brick structure that leaned slightly as if tired of holding itself up. The hallways smelled of old coffee and bleach. My roommate, Victor Harlan, greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was tall, lean, and unnervingly still, like someone perpetually listening to an inner voice. "Ethan Caldwell?" he said, extending a hand. His voice was smooth, deliberate. "Yeah. Thanks for letting me take the room." He nodded once. "You'll find it quiet here. I like quiet." His room was at the far end of the apartment, mine just off the living area. Everything looked freshly cleaned, though in a way that felt almost sterile. He told me he worked night security at a corporate office nearby. That suited me fine. My cafe job kept me out late too. The first week was peaceful. We crossed paths only in passing, him leaving when I came home, me leaving when he returned. I figured that was ideal roommate chemistry, until the noises started. It began one night around 3 in the morning. I woke to the front door clicking open, followed by a heavy dragging sound across the floor, then running water. At first, I thought he'd brought home a big bag of something, maybe cleaning supplies, maybe groceries. But when it happened again, night after night, the sound became harder to rationalize. "Working late again?" I asked him one morning as he poured coffee, perfectly calm. He murmured. "Always something to clean up." He didn't elaborate. By week 3, I noticed smaller things. My coffee mug moved to the wrong cabinet. My shoes turned neatly inward by the door. A towel I'd left damp was suddenly dry. Nothing huge, but enough to make me second-guess my own memory. Still, I told myself, new place, new routines. Maybe I'm just tired. That's what I wanted to believe. 2 weeks later, I woke again at 3:07 a.m. The dragging noise was heavier, slower. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped into the hallway barefoot. The bathroom light was on. Inside, the tub brimmed with muddy water, swirling slowly. Something floated beneath the surface, strands of dark hair, long, curling in the murk like they'd been arranged there. "Victor?" I whispered. No response. I blinked, my pulse pounding. The water stilled, perfectly calm. I backed away. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I was overtired. I didn't check again until morning. When I did, the tub was spotless. Not a single trace of dirt or hair remained. That day at work, I spilled 2 coffees and overfrothed every cappuccino. My mind kept circling back to that tub. When I got home, Victor was at the kitchen table, reading an old paperback. "Hey," I said, forcing casualness. "You been cleaning in the middle of the night?" He looked up, head tilted slightly, eyes sharp. "I like things clean. Helps me think." "What were you cleaning last night?" "The past," he said, smiling faintly. I laughed awkwardly, waiting for the punchline that never came. He went back to reading. That night I installed a small camera above the hallway shelf, aimed toward the bathroom door. I told myself it was for peace of mind, that I'd delete the footage once I saw there was nothing weird happening. The next morning, the camera was gone. In its place, taped to the bathroom mirror, was a note: "No filming in shared spaces." My throat went dry. I didn't mention it. Instead, I started staying late at the cafe, mopping floors until sunrise. When I got home, he was usually asleep, or pretending to be. Something about his quiet unnerved me more than shouting ever could. By October, the tension in the apartment had thickened like humidity before a storm. I tried to keep my distance, headphones on, quick showers, meals eaten out. But Victor had a way of appearing silently in doorways, like he was always one step ahead of me. One evening, I came home early to grab a jacket. The front door was unlocked. Every cupboard hung open, drawers ajar, like someone had searched for something. Victor stood in the kitchen, staring into the empty sink. "You lose something?" I asked. He turned slowly. "I was starting to get used to you, Ethan." My stomach tightened. "Okay, that's good, right?" He smiled. Not wide, not warm, just precise, controlled. "I like when people stay." That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jolt, the creak of the pipes, the wind against the glass. Around 2 a.m., the doorknob to my room rattled, once, twice, then stopped. The next morning, I told him I was thinking of moving out. He nodded without surprise. "People leave. It's in their nature." "I'll be gone by Friday," I said. "Take your time," he murmured. "No rush." When I came home that night, all the lights were on, humming softly. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have filmed me." I deleted it, packed faster. I left before sunrise. I loaded my car in silence, heart hammering. Inside, the apartment looked exactly as it had when I moved in. Clean, neutral, impersonal. Only the bathroom door was closed. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. As I turned the key in the lock, it stuck for a moment like something resisting from the inside. Then it clicked free. I drove east, not stopping until I hit the Columbia River. I found a temporary place with friends in Salem. The first week, I jumped at every creek in the house. The second, I started to sleep again. By the third, Portland felt like a bad dream. Then the call came. A detective named Rains left a message. "Mr. Caldwell, this is regarding your former residence on 9th Street. We'd like to ask a few questions." My chest tightened. I called back. He told me they'd raided the apartment. The tenant, Victor Harlan, was gone. "Disappeared," he said, "but we found something beneath the bathtub." He didn't elaborate, but later I saw the article online. Police discover hidden cash in abandoned apartment. Photographs of personal belongings, hair samples, dozens of candid photos, most of me sleeping. The article ended with a single chilling detail. Records indicate apartment 4B had been vacant for 3 years due to ongoing maintenance issues. I dropped my phone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Who had I been living with? It's been 5 years since Portland. I still avoid second-floor bathrooms and late-night noises. Therapy helped some, but there are nights when I wake up at 3:07 a.m. sharp, certain someone's at the door. Sometimes I dream of that apartment. The sterile walls, the quiet hum of the fridge, Victor's careful movements. I wonder if any of it could have gone differently. If I'd called the cops sooner. If I'd trusted my gut instead of politeness. People think fear comes from the unknown. I learned it often comes from what's too familiar. From the man who shares your kitchen, who folds your towel, who smiles just enough. When I moved out of Oregon, I changed my number, my hair, even the way I sign my name. But no matter where I live, I always double-lock the doors. And sometimes when I catch my reflection in the mirror, I half expect to see him behind me. Head tilted, listening, patient. Trust is a powerful thing. Easy to give, almost impossible to reclaim. We often mistake politeness for safety, silence for peace. But true security comes from listening to the small alarms inside us, the gut feelings we brush off to avoid seeming paranoid. I remember the first time I stepped onto the campus of Lincoln State University, like it was a photograph pinned to my memory. Vermont in early September smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke, and the crisp air made my lungs feel awake for the first time in months. I had been ambitious, determined, and cautiously independent, especially after the past year had forced me to rely too heavily on other people. Moving into my dorm, I had my routines. Unpack, organize, get familiar with the campus paths. I liked knowing my surroundings, having control over small things, where I put my books, the way I made my coffee, the timing of my walks. Independence mattered more than popularity. I had friends, yes, but I had learned to measure trust carefully. Then I met Seth. It was the second week of classes. I was struggling to carry 2 stacks of books back from the library when he appeared. A tall figure with an easy smile and sharp eyes that seemed to notice the smallest detail. "Need a hand?" he asked casually, stepping forward. I hesitated. He was charming, confident, but there was something subtle, magnetic in the way he moved. Thanks," I said, handing him one of the stacks. He carried them effortlessly. "I'm Seth," he said, flashing a smile that seemed harmless at first. "I'm a senior. And you are?" "Laya," I replied, trying to match his calm demeanor. By the end of that first day, he had already memorized my schedule. He knew when I stayed late in the library, when I preferred quiet corners for coffee, and which professors gave the hardest assignments. At first, it felt like friendship, helpful, considerate, supportive. He checked in regularly, texts asking if I'd eaten, reminders to sleep, casual notes about class projects. "You're always working so hard," he said one evening as I packed up for the night. "Let me help. Seriously, I've got time." It was flattering, but flattery can be dangerous when it comes too quickly. That first week of attentiveness laid the groundwork for something that would slowly twist into control. I didn't recognize it at first. The change didn't happen overnight. At first, Seth was everywhere in subtle ways. He would appear near my dorm without prior notice. He always had a reason. "I thought I'd check on you," or "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." My friends reassured me that I was imagining it, that he just cared. But then came the small criticisms, disguised as concern. "Why are you texting him?" he asked one afternoon, watching me scroll my phone. "He's just a classmate," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I just want to make sure you're careful," he replied smoothly. His tone was light, almost a joke, but the implication was clear. I began to question myself. Was I overreacting? I told myself that trust was essential, that maybe I was being paranoid, but the unease settled in my chest like a stone I couldn't shift. Then came the dorm party. It was casual, students laughing, music low, people passing snacks around. He suggested a game of truth or dare. I laughed at first. It seemed harmless. But as the night progressed, he became more intense. Watching, waiting, leaning in. "I dare you to kiss him," Seth whispered suddenly, his eyes cold beneath the surface charm. I froze. I don't want to." "Come on," he insisted, leaning closer. "It's just a game." I tried to step back, but he grabbed my arm. The grip was hard, controlling, his gaze sharp. "Do you think you can lie to me? Tell me you liked it?" His voice was low now, menacing. Fear surged through me, raw and sudden. My heart pounded in my ears. I realized then how dangerous he could be. I had been charmed into ignoring the warning signs, lulled into comfort until control became tangible. When he looked away for a moment, I bolted toward my friend Hannah. Together, we barricaded ourselves in the bathroom. I whispered for her to call campus security, trembling as Seth's knocks turned into threats outside the door. Within minutes, the resident advisors arrived, followed by campus security. Seth was escorted off campus, but he vanished quickly afterward, leaving a lingering sense of danger that couldn't be erased. In the weeks that followed, simple routines became complicated exercises in vigilance. Walking to class felt like navigating a minefield. Shadows in hallways made me jump. Dorm doors creaking in the night felt like intrusions. Texts from unknown numbers sent shivers down my spine. Even casual interactions were filtered through the lens of self-preservation. Friends urged me to press charges, but the thought of confrontation, of reliving the fear, kept me silent. Shame intertwined with trauma, making me doubt my own judgment. Was I too careless? I wondered. Did I lead him on in some way? The questions gnawed at me. Hannah noticed. One night, sitting in our shared study space, she said, "You'll be okay, Laya." I keep thinking, what if it wasn't just that night? I whispered, voice tight. What if he's done this to someone else? Hannah didn't answer immediately. She just reached over, squeezing my hand. Sometimes support is silence, letting the words settle rather than adding judgment. I moved dorms, changed routines, and relied heavily on trusted friends. Freedom came in fragments, carefully negotiated. But even years later, I could remember the whisper of Seth's voice, the mask of charm he wore, and the moment it slipped into menace. Recovery was not linear. I began mapping routes on campus, noting exits, safe spaces, and trusted eyes. Every interaction became deliberate. I learned to ask, who can I trust? Who deserves access to my life? Small victories came quietly. Walking across campus without flinching, ignoring a text from an unknown number, laughing with friends without scanning the room. These were milestones. Independence returned gradually, like sunlight filtering through dense clouds. I also started journaling. Each entry cataloged routines, encounters, and emotions. Writing gave me a sense of control, a tether to reality. The trauma had left a permanent mark, but by documenting it, I gained power over its influence. I met people slowly, selectively, testing boundaries before allowing closeness. Relationships became structured, with trust earned rather than freely given. I no longer assumed kindness equaled safety. By the end of October 2017, I had shifted into a quieter dorm with a small circle of friends. My routines were fortified. I walked paths carefully, aware of my surroundings but no longer paralyzed by fear. Even now, I sometimes feel the echo of that night, the tension, the mask slipping, the power imbalance, but it doesn't control me anymore. I learned that survival often requires cautious vigilance, that charm can hide danger, and that freedom is worth asserting firmly, even when it means stepping away from people who seem to care. I whisper to myself during quiet moments, evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, smiles, and waits for you to lower your guard. But recognizing it, asserting boundaries, and prioritizing safety, can reclaim the space it seeks to claim. True strength lies in recognizing manipulation before it takes root, setting firm boundaries, and having the courage to reclaim personal space and autonomy, even when fear or charm tries to convince you otherwise. When I moved to Durham in the fall of 2019, I thought I was finally rebuilding. It was just me and my 7-year-old son, Theo. We found a 2-bedroom townhouse at 127 Maple Grove Road, small but clean, with a little playground behind the complex. I told myself that quiet was good. Quiet meant safe. I'd spent the last 2 years clawing my way out of a failed marriage and a half-collapsed business. My ex-wife, Jenna, had left for someone steadier, a doctor in Raleigh. I didn't blame her, not really. I wasn't steady back then. The divorce left me hollow and scrambling to be both father and provider. When I landed a few clients for my web design studio, it felt like winning the lottery. Life at Maple Grove was simple. I worked from home, took Theo to school, cooked macaroni, and tried to sleep without worrying about invoices. My mother, Lydia, called twice a week to remind me that routine is healing. I believed her. Then, out of nowhere, Rachel Marsh messaged me on Facebook. I hadn't seen Rachel since college. She'd been part of our study group, quiet, polite, the kind of person who baked cookies for everyone before exams. I remembered her as sweet but lonely. In her message, she wrote, "Hey stranger, I moved to Durham, saw your post about the new place. Maybe I can help with Theo sometimes." She said she worked at an elementary school nearby. She knew how hard single parenting was, how tired I probably felt. "Just until you get your schedule under control," she said when we met for coffee. Her smile hadn't changed, shy, soft around the edges. When she first started helping, it felt natural. She picked Theo up from school when I had client calls, brought over casseroles, and filled the house with easy laughter. Theo adored her. She taught him how to fold paper birds and made up stories about cloud kingdoms. It was comforting, like having a piece of the past slide gently into the present. I didn't notice how her language shifted. She started saying "our" when she talked about Theo. "Our little guy's so smart," she'd say. I'd laugh. "You mean my little guy?" She'd just smile. Of course. I didn't think much of it then. I wanted to believe good people could come back into your life and make things better. I wanted normal so badly that I ignored the tiny warning bells ringing somewhere in the back of my skull. It started in November, right before Thanksgiving. Theo came down with stomach cramps, constant nausea, fatigue. Doctors said it was nothing serious. Rachel came by with soup and a basket of gentle remedies. She always knew how to make me feel like things were under control. One night, taking out the trash, I noticed an empty box of children's laxatives under the kitchen bin. I hadn't bought any. The next morning I asked, "Rachel, did you give Theo anything for his stomach?" She smiled too easily. "Oh, those? I thought they might help. I used to take them as a kid, just a little." "Rachel," I said, trying to stay calm, "that's not your call." She shrugged. "I was just helping." Her tone was light, but something in her eyes flickered, like a fence masked as understanding. The next week she went quiet. She still came over, still smiled, but it felt rehearsed. She started texting late at night. "I heard you were out last night. Who was watching him?" If I didn't reply right away, she'd send another. "I worry when you ignore me. You know I care about both of you." I'd type, "I appreciate it," then delete it. Something about the way she wrote, "both of you," made my stomach twist. My mother came to visit that Christmas. The first thing she said was, "That woman's in your kitchen more than you are." "She's helping," I said. Lydia gave me that look only mothers have, the one that says you're missing the obvious. "Aaron," she said, "helping doesn't mean moving in." I laughed it off, until she found the envelopes. There were maybe a dozen of them, stacked neatly in the spare room closet. Different names, same handwriting, all unmailed. The return addresses were all fake: Georgia, Ohio, Maryland. When I confronted Rachel, she looked almost relieved. "I didn't want you to see those," she said softly. "They're addressed to fake people. Sometimes names don't fit anymore." Her voice was calm, like she was explaining something perfectly reasonable. That scared me more than yelling ever could. After that, she stopped showing up. For 2 weeks, no calls, no texts. I told myself it was over. I even started sleeping again. It was a Thursday in February when the knock came. A man in a gray suit stood on my porch, badge clipped to his belt. "Detective Hall," he said. "You know a Rachel Marsh?" My throat went dry. "She used to babysit my son. Why?" "There's an ongoing case in Charlotte," he said carefully. "A man named Jared Haynes. We believe she was married to him." "Married?" I repeated. He nodded. "She's had several marriages under different names. Mr. Haynes has been missing for 6 months." I remember the world tilting a little, like I'd stepped off a curb I didn't see. I lied to him that day, said I hadn't seen Rachel in weeks, that she was just a friend helping with childcare. He took notes, thanked me, and left his card. That night, I didn't sleep. Every corner of the house looked wrong. The framed photos, the folded paper, birds on the windowsill, the faint smell of her perfume still in the couch cushions. When Lydia heard, she drove down the next morning. She pulled every drawer open like she expected something to jump out. In Theo's room, she froze. "Aaron," she said quietly, "come look." Under Theo's bed was a small box, blue ribbon tied around it. Inside were photographs of Theo playing in the yard, at the park, eating breakfast, all taken through the windows. I sat on the floor for a long time just staring at them. The truth came out slowly, through news reports, court documents, and late-night phone calls. Rachel Marsh wasn't her only name. There was Rachel Haynes, Rachel Leland, Rachel Dwyer. 5 marriages, 5 disappearances. They found Jared's body behind an abandoned farmhouse near Charlotte. Another man, a drifter named Greg Leland, confessed to helping her make things right. I watched the trial on TV. Rachel sat there with that same calm expression she'd worn in my kitchen, hands folded, hair neat. When the jury read, "Life without parole," she didn't flinch. Theo was too young to understand. He asked once, "Is Miss Rachel coming back?" "No," I said, forcing my voice steady. "She's gone." Afterward, I sold the house on Maple Grove, moved north, changed numbers, deleted my Facebook. I tried to pack away every trace of her, the casseroles, the letters, the way she said "our little man." But some things don't stay packed. By 2023, life had settled again. Theo was 11, obsessed with baseball and comic books. We were okay. Mostly. Then, one day, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a paper bird, folded perfectly, creased in familiar hands. More came every few months. Always the same. Neat handwriting. No message. Lydia said, "She can't send those. She's in prison." "I know," I said. But I never threw them out right away. Sometimes I'd catch Theo humming softly while he drew. When I asked what tune it was, he'd shrug. Something Rachel used to sing. The first time I heard it, I froze. It was the same melody I'd once heard her humming in the hallway at 3 in the morning. There are nights I wake up and swear I hear it again. Faint, steady, somewhere down the hall. I tell myself it's nothing. Just memory, echoing where trust used to be. But I still check the locks before bed. I still glance at the mailbox every morning with a mix of dread and relief. Because some people don't just leave your life. They linger, quiet and patient, like a song you can't stop hearing. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles, brings casseroles, and says it's just helping. The lesson I learned is simple. Kindness needs boundaries. Good hearts attract broken ones, but not every broken person wants to heal. You can't save someone by giving them access to your peace. And once trust is violated, rebuilding isn't about fear. It's about learning the difference between generosity and surrender. Because monsters rarely break down the door. Most of the time, you hand them the key. When my family moved into Riverside Towers, I was 8, and the smell of fresh paint mixed with the dampness of the Charles River clung to every corner of the building. My mother, Laura, worked 2 jobs to make ends meet after my dad lost his job at the shipping company, and my older brother Ben called our new apartment the shoebox. He was 12 and always sarcastic, but even he had to admit the balcony had a view worth noting, narrow, overlooking the river, where thunderstorms rolled in like dark velvet curtains. The summer nights were sticky, restless. Fans hummed against the walls, pipes clanged with water pressure, and every little sound seemed amplified. One night I woke up thirsty and crept down the hallway toward the kitchen. I froze when I saw it. Through the sliding balcony door, a dark figure stood motionless. I couldn't make out any features. It wasn't looking at me, but it was there, waiting. "Ben?" I whispered. No answer. My brother was dead asleep. The moment I flicked on the hall light, the figure vanished. All that remained was a faint smear on the glass, like a handprint pressed and left behind. My pulse raced. I told myself it was the streetlights, a trick of reflection, a kid's imagination. For weeks I tried to dismiss it, but then came the tapping, soft, irregular, almost like someone testing the balcony door. Ben called it pigeons. Mom said old buildings make noises, yet every time I checked, the lock felt colder, tested. By August, little things shifted. Cereal boxes would move from the shelf. The remote disappeared. Chairs were turned toward the balcony. Laura, exhausted from work, blamed herself. Ben blamed me. But I started marking the door handle with tape each night, a makeshift check. In the morning, the tape was sometimes loose, peeled away. By the time school started, I didn't mention it anymore. Life at home was already strained. Unpaid bills, fights about money, and Mom crying over the weight of it all. Adding a mysterious figure on the balcony seemed small compared to the realities pressing on us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, watching, lingering just outside the glass. Over the next few years, Riverside Towers became a backdrop for ordinary life. Homework, summer trips, birthday parties. But the strange occurrences never fully stopped. I would sometimes wake to doors I knew I'd locked slightly ajar or chairs shifted toward the balcony. I convinced myself I was imagining it. Sleep deprivation, stress, the chaos of a young family. Surely that was it. Ben left for the Navy when I was 15. Mom remarried a few years later, and in 2014 we finally moved to a duplex in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The new house had sunlight, a backyard, quiet neighbors. For a while, I thought I'd left the past behind. Then in 2019, while clearing the attic, I found a moving box labeled Somerville. Inside were family photos, a cracked snow globe, and the metal handle from the sliding balcony door at Riverside Towers wrapped in an old rag. I called Mom immediately. "They replaced the door before we left," she said, face pale. "The super said it was damaged." "So why keep the handle?" I asked. "I didn't," she whispered. That response chilled me more than any shadow on a balcony ever had. That night, a draft filled the upstairs hall. The attic hatch trembled slightly. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed up. The box was open. The handle lay on the floorboards. I told myself it was fatigue, stress, rational explanations. Yet a knot in my stomach wouldn't let go. A month later, Ben came home on leave. Over beers in the kitchen, I finally told him everything. "You remember the tower?" I asked. "Barely. Why?" he replied, amused. "That balcony, someone used to stand there." "You sure it wasn't me messing with you?" He laughed. "You were asleep, Ben?" His grin faltered when I mentioned the handle. "That's weird," he admitted. "The maintenance guy back then said someone kept breaking into storage lockers. Thought it was a tenant living inside the walls. A kid saw someone on the balcony once, same floor as ours." The weight of what he said pressed on me. I hadn't imagined it. It wasn't just a trick of the light. Something had been there. Later that week, after Ben left, I heard footsteps above the ceiling. The attic again. Measured. unhurried. I called up, thinking raccoons. Silence. Then 3 slow, deliberate taps from the floorboards. My heart raced. I stayed still for hours, listening. By dawn, nothing. But the next morning, the attic hatch hung open slightly. On the kitchen table lay the broken handle, upright, balanced on its edge. I considered leaving it, but I didn't. I couldn't. I moved out a month later, leaving the box behind. Mom sold the duplex shortly after, insisting the place felt crowded. Neither of us spoke about the events again. Life went on, or at least it seemed to. In Chicago, working as a junior architect, I thought the memories of Riverside Towers were childhood anxiety, leftover stress from moving, and years of quiet fear. Until February 2020, I received a call from the new tenants of 14 Holloway Drive, the Portsmouth house. They'd found a sealed envelope in the attic addressed to M. Barrett. Inside was a faded Polaroid of the Riverside Towers balcony, taken from outside the glass. In the reflection, 2 children watched TV, Ben and I, but behind us, something dark and blurred faced the camera. The image was unmistakable, and suddenly, all the rational explanations I'd held on to felt hollow. Someone, or something, had been there, close enough to capture us in the reflection. Someone had moved silently through our lives, unnoticed. I couldn't unsee it. Since that day, I've tried to rationalize. A prank, a stranger's camera, a reflection trick. But the small, irregular taps in the attic, the moving handles, the displaced chairs, they all haunt me. Childhood fear lingers longer than we expect. I still mark doors. I still check locks twice. And I've learned to carry awareness everywhere. Memories don't fade when trauma lingers in physical spaces. They're heavy, like a weight we can carry into adulthood if we don't confront them. Some truths can't be explained, but they teach vigilance. They remind us that safety is relative, and childhood is not always innocent. There are shadows, even in the ordinary. Sometimes the past reaches forward in subtle ways to test our perception, our boundaries, and our courage. Life often places us in situations where fear and uncertainty challenge our understanding of safety and reality. Trust your instincts, stay aware of your surroundings, and don't dismiss subtle signs of danger. Childhood experiences, even seemingly minor ones, can shape perception and intuition, tools we carry throughout life. Awareness and careful observation are as important as courage, for they protect us from harm that isn't always obvious. College had a way of teaching you 2 things at once: how to survive on nothing, and how to convince yourself that surviving on nothing was fun. I learned both of these lessons the summer I moved into the old Victorian on Elmwood Lane with Lila Hart and Miles Donovan. The house had character, though character in real estate terms really meant peeling paint, warped floors, and a backyard that smelled like wet leaves and dirt. Cheap rent outweighed aesthetics for us, and in our tired, overworked, slightly hungover way, we convinced ourselves it was perfect. I remember the first night vividly. Boxes were everywhere. Lila insisted on lighting a few candles despite the breeze coming through the crooked windows. Miles was arguing with the landlord over the Wi-Fi, and I was mostly trying to figure out where my bed was going to fit without blocking the radiator. That's when we noticed the door. It was at the far end of the hallway, thick, iron-bolted, almost flush with the wall. Nothing like the rest of the wooden doors in the house. I had asked the landlord about it. "Storage," he said flatly. "Never open it." It wasn't threatening exactly, but his tone left no room for curiosity. Lila frowned at it. "Why wouldn't we be able to open it?" "Old stuff," he shrugged. "Don't touch it, trust me." And just like that, the iron door became a kind of ghost in the back of our minds, present, immovable, impossible to ignore. For the first week, life in the house was mostly ordinary. There were small things, whispering echoes that seemed too soft to be wind, the faint smell of damp soil upstairs, chairs ever so slightly moved from their usual positions. Each time one of us noticed, The others laughed it off. Old houses make noises, right? Still, the feeling lingered. Elmwood Lane was quiet, too quiet sometimes, and there was a weight to the house, a presence that made corners seem darker than they had any right to be. But we were young and broke, and cheap rent has a way of quieting your skepticism. It was during a violent summer storm that everything changed. The kind of storm that rattles windows and presses the smell of wet asphalt into your lungs. We were gathered in the living room, candles flickering, trying to ignore the wind. That's when the chains on the basement door snapped. They didn't fall, they slackened, dragging along the floor with a metallic scrape. We froze. The basement door had never moved before, and now it was slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for the storm to give it permission. Carson, me for clarity, tried to laugh. Probably just the wind, right? But Miles shook his head. That was no wind, that was deliberate. The three of us stared at the door. Lila whispered, "We shouldn't open it, he said not to. But curiosity is a cruel driver." Slowly I stepped forward and pushed. The door creaked open. Inside, the basement was cold and damp. Polaroids were tacked to every wall, dozens of them. The photos were of people asleep in beds, framed perfectly, some close enough you could see the fabric of their pillowcases. Our laughter died in our throats. This is some kind of prank, right?" I stammered, voice tight. Lila's hand flew to her mouth. No one else should even have a key. Then we saw one photo that made my stomach twist. It was of us, standing in the basement doorway, exactly as we were now. Lila gasped. Miles whispered, "That wasn't here before." We didn't hesitate. We ran upstairs and slammed the basement door shut, yanking the chain tight. That night, we tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize it. But then came the soft clicks, the faintest sound of pins dragging across the wood floor beneath the door. I stopped sleeping well. Neither did Lila. Miles tried to shrug it off, but even he jumped at shadows that weren't there. By the end of the week, small objects started to move. A coffee mug on the kitchen counter, Lila's notebook, Miles's headphones. Nothing was ever taken, nothing ever broken, but enough to make you question your memory. Lila began staying up late, peering into corners, tracing the edges of the Polaroids. Carson, me, would catch her whispering to herself in the kitchen, fingers tracing invisible patterns over tabletops. I tried to reason with her. "Maybe it's someone squatting here," I said one night. "A kid, a vagrant, I don't know." She shook her head, hair falling in her eyes. "No, it's not people. Not real people." I wanted to tell her to relax, to ignore it, but even I couldn't dismiss the feeling of being watched, of knowing that something or someone had observed us carefully without being seen. The house itself seemed to breathe, or maybe it was just the floor settling. Every creak, every distant groan sounded deliberate. And yet, nothing could have explained the Polaroids that appeared in the living room the next morning. Photos of us in the basement again, closer to the camera than before. By mid-August, the storm had passed, but we were trapped. The weather made leaving inconvenient, and each day the basement door seemed to pulse with its own quiet energy. Then, one night, when we tried to leave for a quick errand, I saw movement in the attic window, a hunched shadow staring. We ran. The street was flooded in places, water creeping across the pavement. My heart felt like it had been shoved into my throat. When we returned, the basement door was chained again, exactly as the landlord had left it, and the smell of wet earth lingered in the hallway. I slept in the living room that night, doors locked, lights on. Lila and Miles were tense, but none of us dared speak of what we had seen. Our silence became a pact, fragile but necessary. We left the house the next morning, abandoning it to its whispers, its photographs, and its secrets. I still carry a single Polaroid in a sketchbook, the edges curling, the paper soft from handling. It shows the three of us in the basement, eyes wide with terror. Years later, Lila, Miles, and I still joke about Elmwood Lane, but the jokes are hollow. Every time one of us moves into a new apartment, there's a message. Check your door tonight. We laugh, but none of us sleep easily. Old houses have character, yes, but sometimes that character watches you, waits for you, and leaves pieces of itself behind. Even now, I know that curiosity, combined with inattention to warning signs, can have consequences far beyond what you anticipate. Sometimes, the most ordinary spaces harbor the most deliberate eyes, and the most mundane doors conceal histories you aren't ready to face. Warnings and giving in to curiosity can have lasting consequences. It's not always malicious intent or supernatural forces that threaten us. Sometimes it's human negligence, secrecy, or the unknown histories embedded in the spaces we inhabit. Pay attention to your surroundings, trust your instincts, and respect boundaries, no matter how harmless they may appear. Sometimes, the things left unseen are left for a reason. I never thought nostalgia could kill you. But looking back now, I guess that's where it started, our desperate attempt to relive the past, to feel connected again. It was October 2019 when Connor created the group chat. The five of us, me, Jade Miller, Connor Hayes, Tessa Liu, Evan Parker, and Miles Whitman, hadn't all spoken in nearly 10 years. Life had taken us in different directions. Jobs, families, the usual excuses. But that chat pulled us right back into the rhythm we'd left behind in Ashwood, Pennsylvania. The group was called Senior Year Legends. At first, it was harmless. We sent memes about bad cafeteria food, blurry prom photos, and yearbook pictures we wished didn't exist. The kind of banter that feels warm in the moment but hollow once you put your phone down. Then, late one night, a new notification appeared. Mara Whitfield joined the chat. I remember freezing. My thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding. There was no way. Mara had died the spring of our senior year, April 2010, single car crash on County Road 14. We'd all gone to her funeral. Hey everyone, missed you all. The message sat there, glowing on the dark screen. Miles thought it was a prank. Very funny. Who's screwing around? No one replied. Evan sent, Connor, you add someone? Not me, Connor wrote. Swear to God. Then Mara sent a photo. It was the old Ashwood High gym, empty, lit only by the glow of the scoreboard. None of us remembered taking it. The date stamp read, March 12th, 2010, the day before the senior pep rally. I tried to shake it off. Maybe someone had hacked one of our old accounts. Maybe this was dark humor. But when she posted a picture of us standing by our lockers, one that didn't exist in any of our collections, I felt my stomach turn. That night, I dreamt of the crash site, the twisted guardrail, the sound of glass shattering, and a voice whispering my name from behind the fog. When I woke up, my phone was buzzing. A new message. Reunion soon. The chat wouldn't stay closed. No matter how many times we deleted it, it came back. Connor even factory reset his phone. Still, it reappeared the next morning. Mara, or whatever was using her name, began sending more photos. Some were old, some recent. One showed the parking lot behind my apartment building. Another, a snapshot of Tessa's car parked at the grocery store. We tried rational explanations. Evan said maybe someone found Mara's old cloud account. Tessa called it a cruel joke, maybe by someone from our graduating class. But then she posted something none of us could explain. It was a picture of my bedroom, taken from outside my window. The caption read, Missed you most, Jade. I dropped my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely breathe. That night I barely slept. Every sound in the apartment made me flinch. Around 2:17 a.m., a soft ping echoed from the phone on my nightstand. A new message. Why did you lie about that night? I didn't reply. I didn't even want to touch the screen. The next morning I texted the group. We need to meet, face to face. We chose Connor's place, a neutral ground. Saturday afternoon. Sunlight, people around, safety in numbers. When we got there, Connor already had the chat open on his laptop. The screen flickered, glitching, as if the messages were being typed in real time. "You shouldn't have left me." "You laughed when I cried." "Reunion soon." Evan slammed the laptop shut. "This is messed up." But when he did, the TV in the corner turned on by itself, static, then the faint sound of a girl laughing. Tessa bolted for the door. Miles stayed behind, staring at the screen. "It's her," he said quietly. "It's really her." I wish I could say we all left together. But we didn't. That night, Miles messaged privately. "I'm going to find out what she wants." I begged him not to. He didn't reply. The envelope arrived 3 days later. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in looping cursive. Inside was a photograph of the County Road 14 crash site, Mara's accident scene. The car long gone, the guardrail still bent. A faint shadow stretched across the asphalt, shaped like a person standing just out of frame. At the bottom, someone had written, "Meet me where it all ended. Midnight. Alone." I knew immediately that Miles would go. Reckless, impulsive Miles, who'd always treated danger like a dare. We tried to stop him. Texts, calls, voicemails. Nothing. At 12:07 a.m., Connor texted the group. "He's not answering." The next morning, Miles was gone. His phone, his car, everything. The police said he must have left town. But we knew better. Because the following night, a new photo appeared in the chat. It showed the crash site again, same angle, same shadows. But this time, there was someone else standing in it. Miles. His face pale, eyes hollow. The caption, "Reunion has begun." After Miles vanished, the rest of us barely spoke. We didn't know what to believe anymore. I kept telling myself it couldn't be real, that it was all some elaborate scam. But then I remembered the night of the crash, the things we'd never told anyone. Back in 2010, we'd been drinking at the old quarry. Mara had wanted a ride home, but we were too busy laughing, too selfish to care. Connor tossed her keys to her, saying, "You're fine, it's just 5 minutes away." She wasn't fine. When the cops found her, she'd hit the guardrail head on. We told ourselves she'd left alone. But in truth, we let her. Now it felt like she remembered. The messages turned personal. Accusations, memories we'd buried. "You said you'd watch out for me. You promised. Reunion soon." One night Tessa called, sobbing. "She's in my dreams, Jade. Standing by my bed, just staring." The next day her apartment burned down. Electrical fire, the report said. But in the ashes, investigators found a melted phone, screen frozen on a single message thread. Reunion complete. By March 2020, only 3 of us were left. Me, Connor, and Evan. Connor had stopped sleeping. Evan kept a bat by his bed. I deleted every app I could think of, switched numbers, even moved apartments. But it didn't matter. The night before the pandemic lockdowns began, I received one last envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid, our senior year group photo. But this time, 6 people stood in it. Mara was smiling, standing right beside me. Below it, written in red ink, "All together again." That night my phone buzzed, one final notification. Reunion soon. But this time, it didn't come from the chat. It came from my own number. I stared at the screen until it went dark, the reflection of my face staring back, except for the faint outline of someone standing just behind me. And for the first time in 10 years, I whispered the truth aloud. "I'm sorry, Mara." The light flickered. The phone buzzed once more. I know. The past never stays buried, especially when it's built on guilt and silence. The story of Mara Whitfield isn't just about ghosts, it's about accountability. When we choose to ignore the consequences of our actions, we create our own hauntings. The real horror isn't the supernatural. It's the weight of what we leave undone, the apologies we never say until it's too late. You can't outrun the truth. The things we try to forget are often the ones that remember us the most. Moving into a new house should have been exciting, but I remember that first night feeling more exhausted than anything else. Cedar Ridge was quiet, almost too quiet. The small two-bedroom house had a fenced yard, a cozy kitchen, and a living area bathed in soft afternoon light when I arrived. It smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old carpet, but to me, it smelled like freedom. Finally, a place of my own. A place where I could recover from the accident that had left me in a wheelchair. I wheeled around the house slowly, touching walls, testing doorways, imagining the life I wanted to rebuild. I valued calm, safety, and routine more than ever. But I also knew I would be lonely. My best friend Sarah had been insistent that I let her and her boyfriend Jordan stay for a little while. At first, I hesitated. I needed solitude, but they promised it would be temporary, respectful, and controlled. "I promise, Clara," Sarah had said that first afternoon. "We'll follow your rules. No big pets, no extra noise. We'll pitch in." It sounded reasonable. I signed the agreement in my mind and welcomed them in. For the first few days, it worked. Sarah helped with small chores. Jordan quietly read in the corner, barely touching anything. Peace. Finally. Then the pit bull arrived. Sarah had insisted, waving her phone like it was evidence of its adorableness. "Look at him, Clara, just a puppy. He won't be a problem." I shook my head. "Sarah, he's big already. He knocked over my chair today. And what happens when he lunges at me or someone else?" "Relax, it's a puppy. It's just learning," she said, clearly frustrated. Jordan shrugged from the couch. It wasn't just the dog. Dishes piled up, trash overflowed, and my carefully planned routines disappeared into chaos. I tried to speak up, calmly at first. "Please, you can't leave it like this. I can't live in this mess." Sarah waved me off. "It's your house, but we're staying here too." I bit back a retort, tried to breathe, tried to remind myself this was temporary. But the tension started to simmer, a quiet hum behind every movement in the house. The chaos escalated faster than I expected. The dog grew more aggressive, teeth flashing when I tried to wheel past him. Sarah ignored my concerns, and Jordan never stepped in. Their presence, once a promise of companionship, became a source of dread. One afternoon, Sarah's mother, Elaine, appeared without warning. I had never met her before. She claimed she was there to help, but spoke in clipped, judgmental tones. "You need to keep this place cleaner," she barked. "It's not sanitary." I swallowed my frustration. "I've been managing, thank you. I just have a routine." Elaine's eyes narrowed. "Your routine doesn't include real responsibility." I tried to ignore her, but small incidents piled up. Dishes left for days, furniture scratched by the dog, garbage strewn across the yard. And each time I said something, I felt a shift, a tension tightening around my chest. It culminated one afternoon when I finally confronted them. "This isn't working," I said, gripping my chair tightly. "The dog, the mess, the disruption. None of this respects me or my home." Elaine lunged suddenly. My chair tipped backward. I hit the floor hard, pain radiating up my back and arm. Jordan tried to stop her, hesitated, then froze. Sarah just stood, panic flashing in her eyes but didn't move. The neighbors called the police. I was hospitalized briefly, shaken and bruised. Sarah and Elaine promised to leave, and the police left without pressing charges. But when I returned, the house felt heavy. Every corner held a memory of chaos. I rearranged the furniture, secured locks, and slowly tried to reclaim my space. "This is mine now," I whispered to myself as I set books on the shelf. But even then, at night, I would hear the faint echo of paws, shadows that didn't belong, reminders of the upheaval. Weeks turned into months, and though Sarah, Jordan, and Elaine were gone, their presence lingered in ways I couldn't touch. The house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memory. Footsteps at night, the imagined bark of the dog, objects slightly out of place. My body tensed whenever the wind rattled windows. I started keeping journals, documenting routines, movements, and anything unusual. It helped. I began to regain a sense of safety through structure. Even small victories, like cooking a meal without fear or wheeling into the yard without anxiety, felt monumental. But the trauma had left its mark. I noticed how careful I became with people, how I questioned motives even among friends. Trust, once given freely, now came at a high price. Every phone call, every visitor, every minor inconvenience triggered caution. Sarah called once, months later, apologizing for the chaos, for her mother, for the dog. I listened quietly, nodding even when I didn't believe her. I couldn't allow her back into my life, not even a fragment. The house, once a sanctuary, had taught me a lesson in vigilance. Even when your walls feel safe, the threat of invasion, emotional or physical, can come from those who claim to love you. By 2016, I had begun to reclaim myself fully. New locks, a tidy home, quiet routines. I invited no one in without considering boundaries first. I leaned into my work, editing manuscripts, creating quiet spaces in my day. But old fears lingered. I would sometimes pause mid-activity, imagining the pit bull charging, or Elaine's sneer, Sarah's panicked eyes. I knew logically they were gone, but my body responded as if they were still present. I met people slowly, cautiously. I made small friendships, tested boundaries, and only allowed people in when I felt fully in control. It wasn't just about physical safety anymore. It was about emotional survival. And slowly, I realized I was stronger. The accident had taken mobility, but the ordeal had strengthened my resilience. Every night I survived alone. Every time I reclaimed my space, every locked door was a testament to my autonomy. By November 2017, I decided to leave Cedar Ridge entirely. Selling the house was bittersweet. It held my memories, my pain, and my victories. But it also held the echoes of chaos I could never fully erase. The new apartment in Lexington was smaller, quieter, safer. I furnished it carefully, kept routines simple, and allowed my pets to explore without fear. Nights were still filled with minor flinches, a wind-rattled window, a faint imagined giggle, but I no longer froze. I had learned to respond, to survive, to reclaim control. I realized that survival sometimes meant leaving people who claimed to care, but brought danger instead. Sometimes it meant walking away from what you thought was home to find a real sanctuary. I journaled less frequently, but with every page I reminded myself, boundaries are essential, trust must be earned, and freedom is worth the cost of solitude. True strength comes not from enduring chaos silently, but from recognizing when a situation threatens your well-being, setting firm boundaries, and having the courage to reclaim your life, even if it means walking away from those you once loved.